Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Cast, a video cast about all things Star Wars Destiny. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando.
Hello Destiny folks, welcome back to Dice Commando on the Commando Cast. Thanks for joining me on this Friday. So there was kind of an interesting conversation, or really a side conversation that came out of the Redemption release around the piloting keyword, piloting mechanic. Basically, what's the right cost of it? Is there a cost to it? Should it be carried forward? Was it, and all that sort of stuff. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, the TLDR, right, the too long didn't read, basically the thesis statement is that I really like the piloting keyword. I think it has a place in Destiny, and in fact, I think it probably fixes a lot of the thematic problems that we've been facing over the history of the game. So I really absolutely 100% think it has a place going forward. But a lot of the problems or issues, or at least discussion points, whatever you want to call it, around the mechanic actually evolve or are coming out of the cards that support piloting and not the concept of piloting themselves. So join me today as I kind of muse on that topic and kind of deep dive into my thoughts. Hey folks, so thanks for joining me today. Like I said in the intro, the thesis statement is already pretty clear, but what I wanted to talk about today is basically why I think of that and kind of where I see piloting going forward. So first with piloting, let's really start with kind of the question that everybody asked when we first started to see piloting, because I think this will kind of set a lot of the baseline for the discussion, right? One of the questions a lot of people asked, you saw it asked all the time when piloting was first introduced, was, will all pilots, meaning everyone who has the pilot subtype, will all pilots naturally get piloting, right? Meaning, should we go back and errata everybody who was a pilot, right? Like, should Biggs get it? I mean, maybe Biggs is the best example because he kind of had it, right? But should Maul or Mythil get it and stuff like that, right? And I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the obvious answer was no. I mean, I think most of the community agreed with that. And the reason that they agreed with that, or at least the reason that the people who think that, by and large, is because, well, the characters weren't designed with that. Meaning that there's some inherent, right, we assume that there's some inherent cost, quote unquote, whether it be points or whether it be some other thing. There's some inherent cost associated with piloting. And I think that's why the discussion kind of came out of this with Redemption, and I mean specifically like Benthic, right? Benthic's probably one of the primary reasons, and Dash, and I mean I think we all agree that thematically Dash should have it, right? But the point here is, you look at Benthic and Dak or Dash, excuse me. Well, I mean Dak too, right? But you look at these guys and they're very pushed in terms of stats. Right, and the question is, well, was them having piloting built into their stats, or was piloting just tacked on there? And that's really the source of this conversation. So let me just start by saying I think piloting is a brilliant mechanic, and in fact, it may be one of the more necessarily smart tactics or mechanics that was introduced. Right, I mean, you guys know that over the course of history of Destiny, typically with supports or vehicle decks, quote unquote, the one that always comes to my mind and I have, nightmares about still is Rebel Traders, 4 wide minion, just ramp deck, right? And I mean, over the course of Destiny, that's largely, aside from like the AR period, that was largely how vehicles saw play. Was, unless you were playing like some sort of big vehicle, fat vehicle reset, by and large, you saw some sort of like completely wide characters doing nothing except being meat sacks and taking resources and just kind of overwhelm the board state. And that was really the only way that we saw cool vehicles get in play. And then that was always a thematic problem for, overall thematic problem in Destiny was, ships and TIE fighters and X-Wings, that's a huge part of Destiny. How come I can't, have that and my cool characters at the same time? And piloting was, 100% a great solution to that. So, but there was, if you look at the characters that had piloting in CM, right, introducing it as its set, it was in its set, right, in covert missions, there were a lot of cards that, of course, supported that, but it was kind of in a vacuum in of itself, right? The set itself played fine, at least in theory. You look at characters like Sabine or Poe, or the two that pop to mind as kind of like your classic, pilot examples. Obviously, you had Luke there too, right? But they were held back or whatever because they were tested with, they were designed as they were because they were tested with that pool. And that's really where the discussion goes is, okay, well, as we expand that and we start giving more and more characters piloting, how should those characters have to be held back for piloting? And like I said, I think piloting is a fantastic keyword, and I hope to see it going forward, and I think it deserves a place going forward. And I don't actually think that there's any inherent problem with piloting, right? And in fact, I think that the cost associated with piloting should probably be basically nothing. That said, the problem isn't piloting itself, the problem isn't the characters with piloting, but it's the cards that support piloting. And, like a sail's fine, right? Like that's the same as a pin down, stuff like that. No big deal there. The cards we're having a real problem with are, the first one that comes to mind is eject, right? How many cards out there, or how many decks out there in the current meta are surrounding pilots, because you can eject? The answer is a lot. Like, I don't know what percentage exactly, but it's a high percentage, like in the 60 to 70% of the decks that you see run some sort of pilot or something like that, right? You're even playing, you saw in Vader Terran, like you weren't playing Vader as a pilot, but you'd put him on a merchant freighter and eject because it's such high value, right? So you have eject obviously being, a pretty important piece of this. And then of course, I think the card that probably never should have been created within how eject exists today, I think the card that never should have been created probably is merchant freighter. And that's really the problem, is those two together is, in theory, if you're going to eject, there should be some cost to actually ejecting, right? Ejecting from some piddly, vehicle, aka merchant freighter, that you've already gotten at least your value, at least if not more, out of is crazy town, right? Like you should have to be sacking a 2-drop support with a die or something like that, right? So that's the obvious problem with pilots as they are right now. So that's kind of where my head is at for the long term, is that eventually those are going to rotate, meaning eject and merchant freighter. I think a sail is something that probably if we're going to keep doing pilots, like something like a sail, we should totally keep around. But that's where the onus is going to be on us as a community and on ARH as a design team, is to, if they want to continue to use pilots, which I hope they do, because I think that there's definitely a place for, there's a place in the game. Look at the game we're seeing now, right? We're seeing a game where you can play like a pretty legit character and you can also have a vehicle, and you're not taking quite the same penalties that we used to see back in historical Destiny. So I think that that's a completely legit thing. The problem is the overpoweredness, if you will. I know that's a dangerous word to throw around, but of these events, specifically eject and merchant freighter. And I realize merchant freighter is not an event, but you know what I mean, right? So that's my point here, is when piloting was dropped as one set, they worked within the silo that they had developed in that set, because that was the only piloting support was in that set. And some of that was probably too strong, like flanked by wingmen was probably too good. That's another one. Eject probably should have required it to be a died support. I don't know how you would write that, but stuff along that line. So that's going to be the job of people going forward, is not to stop using piloting, or not to, compare like a Han and Sabine. Like, we don't need to cripple Sabine just because she has piloting. We don't need every guy who has every person in the Star Wars universe who has piloting forever to be a bad character. But we more so need to design around the piloting keyword itself. And I think that's why if you look back at the covert missions meta, we didn't see it. We saw in casual play, we saw a ton of, I played Poe and Sabine and all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, everybody did it in casual thing, but in terms of the competitive side, we didn't see a ton of piloting, right? Not a ton. I think Nick Nelson had that sweet Luke and Finn Rao deck that was really cool. But overall, you didn't see it popping out because other stuff had kept it in check. But then again, as we started going forward, and specifically with Transformations Han, right? I mean, Transformations Han, I think everybody knows where almost everybody else stands on that. Like, he's undercosted, but giving him piloting, like, I don't know if that's something that, like, if he was a character, let's say that there's a completely different character, Ham Solo, in Covert Missions, I don't know that Ham Solo would have been exactly the same. Like, I think that would have been too good of a character. And I can justify that by pointing to Sabine, right? So I think that's kind of the, obviously Han was his own thing. But as we've started to add piloting, which in of itself is basically a value, it's not valueless, but overall the piloting keyword really shouldn't have that much of a cost associated with it, because all it's really doing is accelerating. So I mean, it's basically it's basically something that lets you treat a permanent support as an upgrade, and like fundamentally, that's really not worth all that much. Now, yes, it's advantageous not losing it. I get that. But think about it. Think about what I'm trying. What I'm trying to say is, if we lived in a world where we didn't have eject, would we think piloting was as big of a thing? And I don't think we would, right? So that's more where my head is at in terms of the permanency of it. I think it definitely has a place going forward. So I guess that's actually, I already went through all my bullet points. So I guess that's it for today. Hey folks, actually back here, I was doing the editing and I actually had an interesting thought, so decided I'd reshoot it. I actually, like I said, I'm just throwing this out there, I'm spitballing. Don't even know how I feel about it, but what would you think if we actually restricted eject and merchant freighter? And now, before you go all freakish on me, I don't think it's something that we need for the meta. I don't think that like piloting is such a problem and it's so dominant that like we absolutely don't need it for the meta. So this is really just more of a thought/theory experiment on basically what we've been talking about this morning. What would you think if we restricted merchant freighter and eject? I mean, because my line of thought on this is really that it wouldn't necessarily right in terms of the theme and the thought of running, pilots strafing the Death Star or in their attack wing or whatever. Not running merchant freighter wouldn't really, except for the L, they'd have some serious ramp issues actually, probably. So that's a fair point. And yeah, I don't know, maybe not, but that's an interesting thought experiment, is to consider restricting those two, because then you'd have to choose. I mean, healing 4 is massive, right? And you'd have to choose healing 4 at a cost versus your ramp. That would be a very interesting deck choice. And actually, it's kind of growing on me. I'm not calling for. I want to be very clear here. I'm not calling for the restriction. I'm not calling for that to go in the holocron. But it's an interesting thought experiment, basically, in alignment with what we were talking about. Is, Akbar, I think you still play it because it's your free X-Wing. But would you choose to play Merchant Freighter over eject in like a Vader Terran, or Vader Savage is the congrats Sarah Evans, by the way, that deck's super sexy. Would you play? I think you'd play Merchant Freighter, not eject there, right? And it makes you make some very interesting choices instead of just like automatically throwing in the 4 cost swing card. I don't know, kind of growing on me. Anyway, yeah, let me know in the comments also what you think about this crazy idea. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to throw it out there. Cheers. Go Commando. But yeah, I just I thought it was an interesting conversation because early on, especially when you looked at Benthic and like like, oh my gosh, Benthic has 3 abilities. I've kind of defaulted saying Benthic has 2.5 abilities. But, you know, if we didn't have a Jacked, would we really care about the piloting on Benthic? Probably not, right? If flanked by wingmen wasn't a thing, would Dak Benthic have been as scary without all the pilot support cards, right? And the answer is I don't think so. So I think that that's the goal, and I think that that's the end going forward, is that we just need to make sure that we appropriately cost the things that support the pilots, the guys with piloting. So anyway, that's my take. What, you know, I know there's been a lot of discussion. Some people are very passionate about this. You know, let me know what you guys are thinking as well. You know, jump in on this conversation. You know, like I said, that's just my take. And again, when I started with this, I said part of the primary argument of why not to go back and give everyone piloting is because that's how they were built. So there certainly is some sort of sacrifice that needs to be made for piloting. However, I think that overall in the game, the sacrifice just needs, like, piloting should just help you accelerate speed. It shouldn't let you heal 4 damage effective, right? So anyway, like I said, let me know what you guys are thinking. Thanks very much for stopping by. Shout out to all my people. If nothing else, go Commando.